But it also put us at another level because we are doing the additive and subtractive, that we call it now, under one roof. And there's only about 4 or 5 companies in the country that are doing that all under one roof.
Just a quick reminder for you to like, subscribe, and rate this podcast so we can get your feedback and know how to make it better.
Hey, it's Ari. Welcome to another episode of the Made in America podcast. Today we have Laura Marasco, CEO and owner of West-Conn Tool. Laura, thank you so much for coming on today.
Thank you for having me.
Listen, it's my pleasure, but it's the Made in America podcast, Laura, and we always start off with the same 2 questions. What do you make and why do you make it?
Well, we are a contract manufacturer. And we mostly in medical devices, and we make surgical tools mostly for orthopedic surgeries. We also have additive, where we make spinal implants. And we, we're a high precision, low volume manufacturer. And we do it because, we like manufacturing. Connecticut is the home of manufacturing. And we like to have a good place for our employees to work. And they make good salaries, they have great benefits, and in order to support that, we have to make what we make.
There you go. Absolutely. That's awesome. And Laura, how did you get into manufacturing? Because, I don't think you sort of started as a young girl dreaming of getting into manufacturing.
No, I was kind of bamboozled into it. So
the best way to get into anything, by the way, is being bamboozled. So
yes, yeah. And the mastermind of that was my husband. I was a banker for a lot of years. I was in retail, but banking for probably 15 years before I got into manufacturing. And I met my husband. We were not married at the time when I met him, and I was a banker. And he had the business that he had a partner, and his partner had died, and it had been a couple of years. So now he was on his own, and he met me. I got laid off from the bank a few years into our relationship, and then one day he just asked me to come in to just help out his front office person, Shelley, who's been there for 35 years, and she's still there today, was going on vacation, and she never went on vacation. So he said, why don't you come in and kind of fill in for Shelley while she's gone? And I got there, and I just saw all this stuff that could be done. They were still doing everything on paper. It was much smaller. There was 15 employees. So I searched for an ERP system, which I didn't even know what that was, but I knew there had to be something.
Right.
We got ISO'd. They were in the process of getting ISO, but no one just 100% owned it. So my first 2 things were the ERP system, trying to be paperless, which, that's impossible, but, somewhat. And then the ISO 13485 and 9001. And then from there, we, I just kept wanting to grow. And I have this relentless drive to keep getting better and bigger and faster. And, so we moved into a larger building, which we are currently, and we're at 40 employees now. And still growing.
Look at that.
Yeah. So
I guess the missing magic ingredient was you.
I say that I bring, yes, I have a degree in history. So I say I bring the liberal arts to manufacturing. Yep. And I bring the pizzazz.
There you go. A degree in history and experience in baking and off to the races.
And then the pizzazz.
So when you first walked in, right, it's a lot different than studying history. It's certainly different than a banking experience. What sort of caught your eye or caught your imagination, right from the beginning, to be hey, I want to dig into this?
I think, from banking, the regulatory type stuff, that you do in banking and the processes and procedures, I was able to relate that. I don't know how, but I was able to take that experience and apply it to the manufacturing. So it's really not that different. It just in banking, you're selling money and you're processing money. So this was just processing something else, So that's really, I think, kind of how I applied it. And I had a lot of human resource experience and management experience and things like that through the bank. And then, of course, sales experience. So I just really, and also coming from a large company, one of the other things that I did was, we're a family business. But all of our customers are they are the largest medical manufacturers in the world. So I didn't want us to appear always as mom and pop. So I wanted us to be able to speak their language, but still remain nimble as a family, because that's part of our secret sauce too, is because we are a smaller company, we don't have investors or anything like that. We can kind of do what we want and we can remain very nimble. So I wanted to keep that, but be able to speak the same language as the large companies so they can understand us. Like we didn't even have an org chart when I first got,
Right.
just implemented some more large business minded kind of stuff to just to be able to speak with them, speak the same language.
Seems like it's paid off.
I think so. It was until COVID, but no, it's still good. It's good. Yeah.
So I actually will ask you about sort of that, because I know that people don't always realize that it wasn't just aerospace manufacturing that had some hard times through COVID. So certainly talk about the impact of like shutdown of surgeries and how you guys recovered from that.
Yeah.
But when you started, I mean, look, ERP, super great idea. Obviously moving ISO forward. Those are things that I think really have helped manufacturers spring forward.
Mm-hmm.
You just sort of saw that from the beginning? Was it something that Westcon was already talking about? Like, hey, we got to do ERP, we got to do this ISO, and you just said, all right, I'll own it and move it forward?
Well, the ISO, they did see the need for that. And, Dave, my husband, Dave, who founded the business, he knew, he pivoted to medical in the early 2000s because he saw that what he was doing before was going to go away. Mm-hmm. So he made that first move to do that. And then he continued with that.
Smart guy.
Yeah. And then he did start with ISO. But like I said, there was no one just to own it. Mm-hmm. And it really needed that. So I just kind of just picked up with that one. But then the ERP, like I said, I never even heard of an ERP. But I came from large banks. And we had all different types of software to do different things. And I thought, well, there's got to be a way. Like I knew if I started alone and I could follow it through and, things like that. So I'm like, there's got to be something for manufacturing. So I started researching and I realized that the term for it was ERP. Mm-hmm. And then I interviewed a bunch of companies and then I chose one and, and then I implemented and then I pretty much owned that.
How'd that implementation go?
I think it was fine. Well, it was good. It was good. The floor didn't really need to use it, so it was fine. It was just really just like the managers and the office, and so went from quoting to shipping, and mm-hmm. so there was no interface necessarily with the shop floor. Mm-hmm. Because of the type of work we do. Sometimes they're working on more than one project at a time. Mm-hmm. We're not making widgets, so like all the ERPs are set up for that type of thing. So.
Set up to sort of maximize volume and
yeah,
sort of track that, which isn't really what you guys do. So
Right, exactly. So, but I mean, it was very useful, but I found that we just kind of took our paper and put it into there. Mm-hmm. We could have done better. Now we have a system that we're kind of creating ourselves. There's no algorithm in the world that could ever really kind of be able to set production goals for what we do because mm-hmm. we have all, we just can't schedule everything, but we could try. Mm-hmm. So now we have an ERP system that we can, kind of customize to our own needs, which that's been a long project. And then COVID, in the middle came COVID, so it got pushed back. So, but I think we're on the right path with that. But we kind of outgrew our other one and.
Sometimes I was thinking, I wonder if your ERP implementation probably went better than most because you didn't know enough to second guess what they were doing. I see a lot of those ERP implementations seem like they go sideways when someone tries to like bend the ERP to their will instead of like just saying, hey, let me figure out what this thing does and follow it. And
it's so much better when you don't know what you're doing.
Yes, that's right. It's like that beginner's luck thing, right?
When you don't know what you don't know, you're just stupid. So you just do whatever and it kind of turns out.
Right.
It turns out really well.
So how did you go from ERP implementer and ISO execution owner to CEO?
I don't know, really. I just started, I don't know. We just kept growing and, with the growth, we had to, the money had to be managed better. The HR stuff had to be managed better. The goal setting was never a thing. But I think my banking background always, you live and die by goals all mm-hmm. the time. So just beginning to just implement that, I just kind of usurped my husband, I guess.
There was a coup d'etat. Peaceful, I hope. Peaceful.
Oh yeah, very peaceful.
Yes.
Like unknowingly. Like it was all a master plan for him, I think.
You think he was puppeteering this thing the whole time?
The whole time.
Well, that's the dream, right?
Yeah.
Find somebody who can do it.
Yeah, so just being able to, just to do all those things. And then, beginning to build a middle management, I did that. And so that, we have our son who's the chief operating officer. We have an operations director. We have quality. At one time it was all Dave. I look at old stuff and it was just like quality manager Dave, president Dave.
That's why you didn't need an org chart.
Dave,
you didn't need an
sales
org
guy.
chart.
Yeah,
Someone held all
it was
the
Dave.
roles.
It was
Yeah,
just
exactly.
one big Dave. Yeah.
Yeah.
So, we have more middle management, with that, and it gets more and more expensive because you don't have we have a lot of people on the floor making things, but with ISO, you need more people that aren't making things. So we have a lot of that. And at one time, Dave's whole thought process was, if they're not making something, we're not hiring them. That's why there was one person in the office, and that was it.
Gotcha.
So she did everything, got the jobs out on the floor, all that type of stuff. But as you grow, and with the ISO, there's a lot more paperwork, there's a lot more compliance and things like that. So you need more people that aren't making something. But it's just as important, really, as the
Quality is like everything, right?
Quality is everything, and luckily we're very quality minded, and that comes from the culture that we have. Even before we were ISO, Dave was very, quality was his thing, and that's just our culture. So it doesn't belong to one person; it's everybody in the company lives and dies by quality.
Got to do it, right?
Yeah, yeah.
You say high complexity, low volume. So for people out there that are wondering, like, what does that mean? What do you guys do? Maybe explain to some listeners what you mean when you say like high complexity, low volume.
I'd say it's very, very small parts that go into assemblies of an instrument. So it would be a whole bunch of components with high tolerance.
And when you say an instrument, we're not talking about guitars.
No, we're talking about like a screwdriver or
Right.
a tap, something to do a spinal surgery.
Mm-hmm.
Sometimes to measure before they do an implant. Sometimes to implant an implant. So it would just be all the components that would go into one instrument that would be very tight tolerances, and then have to be assembled. And the assembly has to be done by hand. So
All of them.
Yeah. So all of our employees on the floor, all of the manufacturing, we have tool makers, but then we have a lot of CNC, and they are all program, set up, and operate. So we just don't have people just sitting there operating all day long. They're very, very highly skilled. So we have a lot of highly skilled people under one roof. And then the tool makers, they're not programming as much, but they're still very, very highly skilled.
So with all this like highly skilled work and like high complexity, how do you go about recruiting and finding the people you need to sort of staff? I mean, you've almost more than tripled the size of the business, in the last several years. Like, so how do you find the folks to support that?
We've gotten very good. I say we've gotten pretty good at it over the years. We have good relationships with the schools, Housatonic for one, with their manufacturing program. Platt Tech has a great program. So we have good relationships with them, and we've gotten really good at being able to identify talent. So someone that maybe, they have the ability to learn this, and we have good guys that just train them. So we found it's better for us to hire less experienced people and train them.
It's like a farm team kind of.
Yeah. I mean, that's not to say if we find, a highly skilled programmer, operator, setup person, we'll take them. That's kind of like a unicorn.
Right.
So we have to kind of mold them. So even if we take someone who's been doing CNC for 20 years someplace, they're going to have to increase they have a learning curve even if they've been doing it for a long time because of the type of work that we do. So it's a great place for people that are working at other companies that they've been there for a while. Maybe they feel stagnant. Mm-hmm. You'll never be stagnant because there's always new stuff coming through. There's always new challenges. So it's a great place for people who are experienced to learn more, and then for young guys or women to come in and just start a great career where they make great money too.
Yeah. And so is that training program something that you guys have sort of institutionalized? It's just sort of part of the DNA of the company?
It's just part of the DNA. Yeah. I mean, we do participate with the apprenticeship program, the state of Connecticut apprenticeship, so they could do that and they can get their hours.
How have you found that, the apprenticeship program?
I mean, it's fine.
Yeah.
It's good. I mean, they give you subsidy for a little while. I mean, we blew through that money like right away, but they will continue to let them do Tooling U for free. But if they had gone to a technical school, they don't need that.
Right.
So then it's just putting in the hours and then just having the mentors in the shop. And the guys at the shop are really, really good about being mentors.
No issues about sort of cross-generational communication and training?
No. The only thing that, as long as they're willing to listen.
Well, I mean,
like anything else.
I was going to say, right.
Like anything else. But as long as there's someone and they have the talent, they're very good at picking up if someone's just not going to make it. We try not to get there, but every once in a while it happens.
Can't be perfect every time.
Right. So we're good about that and just kind of moving on from things like that. But for the most part, the guys are really, really, they have no problem with passing on their knowledge and sharing their knowledge. And yeah, we have a good group of guys. And when people come, they always say, I can't believe how many talented people are all under one roof.
Right.
So we're very lucky in that way.
Listen, better to be lucky than good sometimes, right? In your role as like CEO, are you out there talking to customers a lot and like sort of doing some business development work?
I don't that much. No, I don't. Jake, our son, he does that more because our business is very engineer to engineer.
Gotcha.
So Jake is an engineer.
All right,
and then Adam, who is our additive, which is our new line of business, he's an engineer. So they do that the most.
They're out there facing with customers, dealing with that.
That being said, I do meet with customers, and if they do come visit, or I'll go on visits and things like that. But for the most part, because it is very engineer to engineer.
So I was wondering if you're sort of, you clearly your experience with banking and big business has brought a lot of like a wealth of experience that probably a lot of other small manufacturers would love to have. Mm-hmm. But I was just sort of curious. A lot of the manufacturing owners that we talked to come out of the technical background, right? And I was just wondering how you find that on your
Yeah, I don't. I'm a really good parrot. So, and but I mean, really, so it's me. I overall, and then Jake more the operations. But it took two of us to do what Dave did all by himself,
right?
So.
Well, sometimes it takes a team, right?
Yeah, exactly.
A village, not just a village to raise a child, the village to grow a company.
Right,
I suppose.
But Dave was the one. He was out there selling. He was making all the relationships. He was bringing in all the business. Then he was, running everything through the floor and making sure everybody was doing what they were supposed to, and that type of thing. But he did need someone like me,
right?
So
who could help kind of grow and like scale it. So who's out there beating the streets for new business?
I would say Jake, and then Adam for the additive. We have been lucky also because we've been in business since 1983, and most of our business started really just with one large company. And then as the engineers left that company and went to others, they just would call us because Dave had just built such great relationships that Jake continues to maintain. And Adam, who our additive, he also, but even some of the companies that we knew engineers from years ago now have gone over to additive, and we've gotten business that way. So we tend to stay in touch with the engineers. Mm-hmm. And then as they move and go to new companies, then that's how we get a new company. That's most of the time. We have to go out and start kind of beating the bushes for
doing more like
for a little
sales.
Bit more proactive. We hadn't had to be proactive. We have been in the past probably 5 or 6 years. And that is something else that I did implement because we never had to do that. We didn't even have a website, actually.
Really?
Because, yeah. And I did it. That's the other thing I did was we did the web. I didn't do it, but I hired someone to do the website years ago because just to legitimize us to get employees.
Right. If people want to look you up.
Right. It's like you can't not have a website. So, and that was a while. That was like 12 years ago that we got the website. But I forgot that was something else that I did.
Because once you get to a certain size, like when you're smaller, right, that word of mouth and stuff can really sustain you. But you start getting 40, 50 employees. Like you got to kind of get out there a little
You need
bit
to
more.
get out there more. You need higher volume. our name, we've been around a long time, and because we did do a lot of fixturing and automation, sometimes there's some old engineers that we worked with in the past that don't realize how technologically advanced we are. Because that's another thing that, we're always looking for the next best machine software. We have the latest and greatest. We stay up on technology all the time, including with the additive. We were always looking at it when we had an opportunity.
Yeah, like you've said additive a few times. Let's kind of talk about that. What kind of additive are you guys doing? How'd you get into it?
We're doing metal laser sintering, so it's titanium powder that gets layered and lasered to each previous layer, and we're making spinal implants with that. So that was an opportunity that came to us in December of 2020, which was the worst time that it could have been presented. But I figured, if we're going to go down, we're going to go down big. So we jumped at it. And again, it's another thing where you don't know what you don't know. And thank God you didn't. Because, it's been good. It's taken about a year to really get everything validated.
So when you said the opportunity came, so let's just take one step back here. So you're doing metal powder, additive manufacturing with laser sintering. So essentially taking this powder, you have a design, and then it sort of lays on the powder, use a laser to sort of harden it, and you keep laying on layer over layer. So how did this come to your attention that it was available, and what were you when you decided to take the plunge? What were you what made you decide to jump off that bridge?
So we were, like I said, we were always looking at it, and it was
just because you just thought
we thought it was going to be the next thing, and but it's very expensive to buy machines. We're close to $1 million, so and we didn't, we just didn't. We were keeping our eye on it. So we had an opportunity. There was a company in Connecticut that was leaving Connecticut, and they had these machines. They just decided they're a huge Swedish company, and they wanted to get it. They decided one day, let's try contract manufacturing. Thinking, easy, peasy,
anyone can do
medical
it. Right?
Contract. We have billions of dollars. Let's do it. So they did it. No, they said no. So that August of 2020, they just said we're done. We're closing. So Adam, who was working for this company,
so that'd probably been a pretty tough year for them anyway, right?
Yeah. So other people that we knew through the business through the years came to us. They said, do you know anybody who would want to buy them? And someone that knew us said, let me give Westcon a call. So they called us, and I'm like, oh, that's kind of crazy. But he said, well, can we come talk to you? So they did. They came and talked to us, and Adam basically said, I need a job, and there's not a lot of companies that would hire me. There's not many in Connecticut doing it. So he gave us kind of a business plan, and we were able to get 3 machines for less than the price of one, plus a year's worth of powder.
Oh, wow.
And I negotiated. It was we went to go look at them the Monday before Thanksgiving. The day after Thanksgiving, I was negotiating with them. We had to purchase them by December 31st. and there we went. And and there it is. And Adam came on, and now we have 3 people pretty much dedicated.
Seriously?
We have another engineer starting in September. We really didn't start shipping product until January, and it's been
January of this year. So it took you, so that's what you said, almost that full year to just sort of figure it out?
Yeah, kind of figure it out. Well, validate the machines, get with the customers. Yeah, Adam had been working with some customers that he was ready to onboard, but then the company was just closing. So he's like, sorry, we're closing, but I'm going over here. But it also put us at another level because we are doing the additive and subtractive, that we call it now, under one roof. And there's only about 4 or 5 companies in the country that are doing that all under one roof. Most of the additive companies have to send it out if there's a milling process or something like that.
And I mean, I think people don't always realize that even with additive manufacturing, there's usually some secondary operations that need to be done to just finish up the part, right?
There are, yeah. So we do use the mill. I mean, there are some specialty operations that have to go out, like hipping, which is a fancy heat treat type thing. But there's definitely secondary stuff that we can do where other additive companies would have to send them out, maybe to somebody like us.
Right.
So we could do it under one. So that's one of our selling points.
Did you know that you had customers that were interested in the additive before you sort of took the plunge?
A little bit. There are some that want to get into it. And the other thing with Additive is, so the companies that we're servicing are smaller startups that can't get the love from the larger Additive, like 3D Systems and things like that. So that's where we've always been really good at servicing our customers, working with them on designs, things like that. So that's kind of how we're getting into these smaller companies. And then hopefully they'll take off and we can grow with them. So that's, we have to.
So you're not selling the Additive stuff to the same large customers that you're doing your other pieces for. So they're different customers.
Yeah.
Oh, that's kind of cool
Yeah.
though.
Yeah.
So you get a little customer diversity out of it.
Yeah.
And we say they're like startups. What do you mean? Like give me some example.
They're like,
however much you want to share. But
yeah. Well, I mean, they're just like an additive company that's making a spinal implant. And there's a lot of investment money out there, private equity, things like that, for these companies that come up with a design and they just throw money at them.
To try and see if they can get it to land and take off, because if it does, it's huge.
Right. And then we can get them to market quicker because we are smaller. And that's the name of the game, is getting it to market first. So that's how we're able to service those customers. And then, like I said, if they grow, then hopefully we can grow with them.
Has it been, do you find that the people like really enjoy working in Additive? Is it a different, like, does it have a different sort of technology bent to it? Does it seem a little bit newer, or kind of more of the same?
It's cleaner.
Yeah.
And it's more, you're slicing the software is like slicing the programs and so it's cleaner. It's not, we have like an operator for the machine and he'll just take the build plates off and clean them up. And then it still goes through our regular quality system and all that type of stuff. So it's just more programming type thing.
Yeah.
And it's a lot of paperwork, of course.
Yeah.
So, yeah, but I mean, it's a really good addition, and it truly is additive.
Right to the business. Yeah, there you go. Additive in multiple different ways.
It's truly additive.
That's pretty cool. So you had mentioned they do a lot in medical devices. Do you guys dabble in any other fields from manufacturing?
We do some aerospace because we are in Connecticut. So components, we do some commercial type stuff. Mostly that would be more like the fixturing and things like that. But the majority is the medical. That being said, during COVID, we did have to pivot over to aerospace more because with the surgeries being canceled, that definitely had an effect.
So when you think about that and you think about sort of like, having some level of resiliency in the business to avoid any industry dips, do you think about sort of maintaining some additional, like, building out some diversity in your kind of industries you serve over time? Yeah,
and that's why we do it. And it's difficult, but it's worth it. Because we don't want to put all our eggs in one basket.
Why is it difficult?
Because, different customers have different needs. They have different protocols. So you have to constantly manage, who needs what and making sure that it gets communicated to the floor and who need, what they need, what they want, how they want to inspect it. There's a lot to it. I can totally see why some companies are like, we just do this for this company, like just a Sikorsky provider or, that's easy peasy. But if one of those companies pull up stakes or decides that they don't want to use you anymore or they want to send it offshore, you're in a bad place. So we try to avoid that. And it served us well during COVID.
And you feel that diversity is worth the effort?
It's totally worth the effort, but it's not for the faint of heart.
No, it's not for the faint of heart. Just a lot of extra complexity you sort of got to deal with along the way.
Exactly. Yeah.
So when you talked about you took over from your husband as CEO, you got other kids and you got some kids in the business. How was like that transition from Dave to you?
It was very seamless. I mean, for us, I think it was. And, when Jake coming in, we work very well together. We really, I think, because he's the engineer and I'm not, so we have that symbiotic relationship. And I don't know. I never even really thought about it. It just kind of happened. And as Dave retired,
you didn't need like all types of like external consultants or all kinds of planning. It just sort of worked organically. And just organically
transitioned. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. And now Jake and I do work. We do work with strategy, a strategy company that's helping us like really build out a real formal 5-year plan and that type of stuff. So we do that now. But just because the whole world has just become so much more complex. It used to be so easy. When Dave started the business, he would go to lunch with the engineers and they would put a drawing on a napkin.
Right.
And
just make it work.
he would come back and
Yeah.
they'd make it and they'd send it out. I mean, literally, that was it. Now it's, drawings and models and rev changes and, all different types of inspections and what to inspect and what not to inspect and what, it's just endless. So it's a very, very different world. And then, of course, the economy, everything's much more expensive. Salaries go up and you have to maintain that. I mean, it's just harder and harder and harder. So we need all the help
All the planning and the help you can get.
Yeah.
Has supply chain been a problem for you guys?
A little bit. For actually just the past couple of months, I was constantly saying before, which I probably shouldn't have, I probably jinxed myself. I kept saying I got 99 problems, but supply chain ain't one. but a little bit. We have a machine that we just ordered that was supposed to come in August, and now they're like, oh, it's leaving Sweden in February. There's some specialty metals that we're having a hard time getting, things like that. So, but the stuff that we buy 17.4, things like that, we've been okay with so far.
Haven't had too much trouble.
But not too much, but we've definitely seen it. And this past quarter, we've definitely felt inflation a little. Mm-hmm. May was like, all of a sudden, it was like, oh my God, we were doing really, really well. I mean, we're still doing well, but I just felt the inflation in May. I'm like,
prices
what
just
is going on? And the surcharges and, it's just amazing.
Yeah, it's definitely moving everywhere. So thinking about that, you talked about the training that happens on the floor with the folks that you hire. What do you do to what have you done and what do you do to sort of help get yourself trained or learn more about manufacturing, help grow? Do you get involved in like any associations?
Yeah. I'm a manufacturer CT. I'm actually on the board. I just was just admitted to the board in June. So I do that. I'm in 2 different peer groups. So that's where I started in like 2014. I started with my first one. It's all manufacturers. And
is it through like an organization?
Yeah, it was New Haven Manufacturers Association, which is now Manufacturer CT. So it was through there. And I did that because, the only manufacturing I knew was Westcon.
Right.
So I joined that peer group in 2014, the end of 2014, and I'm still in it to this day. And it's all different manufacturers. We're not competing, not competitive at all. So I've learned a lot from them, those guys. And I'm always the only woman.
Are you?
Yeah. And then I'm in another group.
Because manufacturer CT, anyway, I'll let you finish.
Yeah, there are a lot of women. And on the board, there's plenty of women. I think it seems to be almost 50-50, not quite, but it's pretty, there's more women. But in my peer group, I've always been the only woman. And I've learned a lot from them. So things that maybe I suspected I should be doing, or that sometimes it just gives me an amen, like I was doing the right thing and that type of stuff. But I've definitely learned a lot from those guys. And there's a bunch we get new people in all the time, but there's a few guys that have been there since the beginning, and I definitely have learned a lot from them. I read. I think I've always had an ability to apply things that don't seem like they're similar, but can just apply them.
That's actually a really huge competitive advantage, right? Because if you're sometimes in sort of any echo chamber, everyone's just sort of doing the same stuff. You don't really get something different. But if you can take something that's sort of outside of the box and figure out how to use that inside, that's got to be huge. That's what I do. That's what I try to do. Yeah. So I think that's, in my husband, he's been a manufacturer his whole life and he's been really good at it. So he's always been a mentor for that. And then Jake, being an engineer and all the guys that work there, they're just really amazing, really smart people. And they've embraced you as one of their own from the early days? I think so. They've always been nice to me. So I don't know what they say behind my back, but well, that's good enough. You know what I mean? At least to me, they're great guys. And, it's great to work. Like I always say, tool makers are what brought us out of the caves. So absolutely. If the end of the world comes, I know I'll be good. The right people. I can rebuild. Absolutely. What made you decide to join the manufacturer CT board? They asked me. and I enjoy. I'm on the board of Griffin Hospital too, so I enjoy board work. Yeah. And I thought maybe my next phase, as we grow, as we get more people in, to do. I'm hiring an HR person. As I'm able to free up some of my time of the things that I do. I would like to get more into helping promote
manufacturing in Connecticut. Maybe some legislation type stuff. So I feel like maybe that, that could kind of be a springboard to help with that, getting more into the government affairs. And I would like to promote manufacturing in Connecticut because I think it's a great place for manufacturing. There's no place else that has the legacy. I mean, most of our guys, they're third, fourth generation tool makers. Their grandfathers, great grandfathers. You don't get that anywhere else in the country except in the Northeast.
Absolutely. Listen, that tradition, that history, it's meaningful. And
it's very meaningful.
Yeah, and it's got some real legs to it if we can harness it.
It gives a competitive edge, and that's why we have to charge more.
There we go. Awesome. Laura, it's been really, really great talking to you. I'm going to flip us over to a rapid fire round of questions to wrap this up. Are you ready?
Yeah.
You sure?
I don't know.
Here we go. Red Sox or Yankees?
Yankees.
Starbucks or Dunkin'?
Starbucks.
iPhone or Android?
iPhone.
Sports car or SUV?
SUV.
When you take time off, would you prefer staycation or exotic destination?
Staycation.
Ooh, wow. I had you pegged for exotic destination.
I'd
was
like
wrong.
to think I was exotic destination, but
staycation's where you're at. Got to follow your heart. Do you have a favorite business book?
A favorite business book. I just read The Infinite Game by Simon Sinek. Mm-hmm. That was I really liked that. And that's the most recent one I read, so I'd have to say that's my favorite now.
Yeah.
I'm reading the Ray Dalio Principles too.
Principles, yeah, that's a good one too.
Yeah.
If you had to do something other than be CEO and owner of West-Conn Tool, what would you do?
Well, I would, which I did do right before COVID in November of 2019 as a side hustle, I opened a meditation and yoga studio.
Really?
Yeah, I did. And it was beautiful. And it was doing so well. And it opened November 1st of 2019. And then it closed on the Ides of March. Oh. and it was just too new, but it was everything I wanted it to be. And I just always intended to do it as just a side and maybe open up a few, like a chain of them. But
so maybe you'll bring that back. I
don't know. It was a lot of work. And then the momentum. I could never get the momentum back.
Yeah, it's tough to do. Thinking back on what you've learned in your life and in your career, what do you think's helped propel you to all the success that you've had?
It's continuous. This sounds very ISO, continuous improvement. And I think really it's just not to be discouraged, just to keep going and to have courage, as the opposite of discourage, just keep going. And when the bad times come, just keep going. I remember one time I was driving through a terrible rainstorm in Florida with my mother, and I kept wanting to pull over. And she said, no, you got to keep going because you got to come out the other side of the rainstorm. And that's exactly what it is. You just keep going. Because if you just stay there, you're just going to be
drenched. Exactly. Yeah. What's something that you learned later in your life or later in your career, Laura, that if you could go back and tell young Laura and she'd listen to you, you think would really have a positive impact on her life?
It would be that whatever you do, you can always build upon that. You don't have to say, I'm going to be this one thing, because everything you do leads you to better things and more. Everything you do, you can always use. It's like empirical knowledge. You just don't. I used to stress, like, I don't know what I want to be when I grow up. You don't have to know. I wish somebody told me, it doesn't matter. Just keep doing what you're doing, and eventually you'll just keep building on it until you get to a place where you look back, like I do now, and say, everything I did before this brought me to here, and who would have ever thought that? And I really love what I do, and I wish someone had told me that.
Don't stress. You'll get where you go if you just keep moving forward.
Just keep going.
Laura, that was awesome. Listen, thanks again so much for coming on. It's been a real pleasure talking to you.
Yeah, thank you.
Made in America with Ari Santiago is brought to you by CompassMSP.
Thanks for listening and spending some time with me today. My goal is to help build a strong manufacturing community, and it would be impossible to do without all of you.